Welcome to Generation Digital Workforce, the podcast that's here to explore the role of robotic process automation and other digital technologies. Whether you're just getting started or you're looking for advanced strategies and tactics, if you're curious about where human and digital workers are coming together to transform the future of work, then this podcast is for you. All right, let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Hairston with Blue Prism. Today on the podcast, my guest will be Ted Shelton, an expert partner with Bain Company's automation and digital innovation practice. I'm going to be talking with Ted about the future of business, specifically what the C-suite should be doing over the next 5 to 10 years to reshape their companies for the digital world. Ted, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Brad. Glad to be here and having this conversation.
All right, so let's start with your introduction. If you could just give everyone a little bit context on your background, that would be great, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Sure. Well, I have been involved in the intersection of technology and business really my entire career, starting out as a software developer and then working in the software industry. And for the last 12 years, I've been involved in what we started to call in the late first decade of the 2000s digital transformation, and that was really about how do companies react to the change in the way their customers expect to interact with them because of digital technologies that they were experiencing as consumers. The web, of course, but starting 2007, mobile and social media started a few years before that. And then the realization was that actually this wave of technology transformation was going to transform everything about the way we run our business. And that transformation continues to this day. I think automation in particular has been a part of the things I've worked on for about 8 years now. And it is only accelerating, Brad. So we'll keep seeing this, I think, over the next decade, continuing transformation of the definition of work and how we all do it.
Absolutely. So Ted, let's set the stage for this conversation. What are some things C-suite executives are facing today that are influencing how they define the 5 to 10 year plans for their companies?
So Brad, I think the thing that's changed in our economy is the importance of technology, and it's been a change that has incrementally been happening, but it's continuing to accelerate. So where 20 years ago, technology was certainly a part of our business environment. It was just a tool, like I might have pencils or paper, but I might have a computer. 10 years ago, and talking about digital transformation, we started to see that the way that we run the business has to change because of the use of technology by initially customers. Today, I think the acceleration of that is that technology is now really a strategic lever for businesses to pursue their ongoing improvement activities. So companies are constantly, in order to be competitive, having to improve how they produce their products or services and how they deliver them. It may be about reducing cost, or it may be cycle time reduction or risk. But it's all about, at the end of the day, producing better products or service experiences that improve all of their stakeholders' experience, the customers, the shareholders, the employees. And so technology has this continuing impact. But now I think with automation, what the C-suite needs to be thinking about is how technology is actually going to change the way the work gets done. Because I think historically we've looked at technology as being, and the IT department as being about providing applications and infrastructure that support the work that needs to be done, but the work is done by people. And now there is a separate, parallel, complementary technology thread which addresses who does the work. And so we're going to see an increase in how much work is done by automation, and we're going to see a change in the nature of the way people work. Now, there's no visibility into a future where we've got Jarvis from Iron Man, right? We're not talking about general artificial intelligence. We're not talking about we talk about automation. It's we steer clear of science fiction, but we will see a set of activities that humans have historically needed to do that can increasingly be done by automation in partnership with people. So people will still do the creative work, the collaborative work, build relationships, do problem solving. But two things will be true. One is they'll have a partnership with automation. So the automations will augment what people are capable of. And there'll be a portion of the work that gets redesigned so that it is entirely done by the automation. And so the C-suite really needs to be thinking about how are we going to, over the next decade, do three things. One is redesign work so that we're appropriately assigning tasks to people or automations. Two, though, and really critically, how are we going to manage the culture change in our organizations so that people embrace this new future and understand that actually we're creating better jobs, the jobs of the future, because we're really giving people more opportunity to do the things that people are really good at. But it is going to be a change, right? And so people will be unsettled by that. And so they'll need to manage that change. And so it's both operating model and organizational change, which is core to the way every business operates and competes. And that's why it really is a C-suite issue.
Ted, I think you're making a couple of really strong points here about the C-suite. How in the coming years, they really need to think about how work gets done across their organization and also how to manage the cultural change underlying it. Really important points. When you talk about companies reshaping the way work gets done through a hybrid workforce, the combination of human workers and digital workers, how do companies determine exactly what work is in scope?
So there really is no work that is out of scope. I think the question is really when, not what. Even when we talk about physical labor, increasingly physical robotics is augmenting or replacing human labor. So the self-driving car, the automated warehouse, manufacturing robots, which have been around since the 60s, right? I mean, I think we will increasingly see that that continuing in the physical environment. But I think the big change is now we see it in the area where it's about brain work, as opposed to physical work. And I think the only thing holding us back from applying automation to either augment people or replace the work that people would have done is the evolution of the technology. So, for example, Google demonstrated a couple of years ago now, I think it's 2018, a technology that they call duplex, in which they can have a computer make a phone call to you, and you can interact with and have a conversation with that program, and narrowly applied. So applied to, in the example they showed, making a hairdresser appointment and making a restaurant appointment. But there's a whole set of technologies that are complex and expensive in that. So you've got to be able to listen to voice, transcribe it into text that can be processed by the computer, then process that text to be able to extract meaning and follow a logic flow. And so the average company is not going to put that technology in place today, but that technology would be less and less expensive every year, and eventually it will be put in place. And so that's why I say I think the question is really, when we look at these tasks, we say, well, there are tasks that require listening to a speaker and transcribing and deriving meaning from that. They will be automatable, but not until that technology reaches the right price point in the curve.
That makes sense.
I guess the other thing, Brad, I'd add would be, if you think about it this way, think about it as what is the place that automation more easily will be applied to, and that's where we're going to start. If I take the physical world analogy, if you imagine a robot navigating a flat surface, that's a lot easier than if it's navigating one with a lot of obstacles or steps or something, right? And so use that analogy to apply to the digital world as well. There are steps and obstacles in our digital work environment that it'll take time for the technology to be able to navigate.
Right. So let's talk about intelligent automation. The combination of AI and digital workers. Many are saying, Ted, that companies' success with integrating AI into their business processes is going to determine, who's going to win, who's going to lose in the coming years. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that are happening that are really interesting around what broadly the marketing term is used as AI, right? But AI, is attached to a bunch of different kinds of things, and we should talk more about all the things that it's attached to. But let me talk about outcomes. What we want to be able to do is to use machines to do things at a scale that people can't do them at. So the challenge for how that will be applied in business has to do with the application of that technology cost effectively. If we look at simple equation, Moore's law, which has been around now for decades and continues, relentlessly to tell us something about the universe that we live in, because it seems like every time we seem like we're going to reach the end of Moore's law, some new technical breakthrough gives us another lease on life to extend that timeline. So if you follow that thread, by 2030, at the current pace, we will have a $1,000 computer that has the processing power, or the transistor equivalent in numbers, to the human brain in neurons.
Wow.
And now we don't have the software to make a human brain, right? So it's not an equivalency. We're not saying, oh, well, by 2030 we're going to have Jarvis, right? The point is rather that cost curve for the scale of processing means that there are tractable computational problems that we can solve in the next decade that we can't solve today. And so when we think about what those kinds of outcomes might be, it's about using the machine to recognize, using the machine to predict, using the machine to recommend, and in complex environments with analog content that needs to be interpreted, right? So in a manufacturing environment, if I said, hey, I want to be able to understand everything that's going on inside my manufacturing environment, and make sure that there are no safety concerns that we should be concerned about. Today, I could not put a set of cameras around my manufacturing environment and expect that computationally I would have the ability to process all of the images being fed at a pace to be able to understand where my risks are. In 10 years, I will. In 10 years, the intelligence will be right in the camera to be able to interpret that there's a dangerous work condition. And so we're going to see a world in which these AI technologies are embedded into all of our workflows and all of our equipment and all of our service delivery in ways that are going to change the way that our products are made and delivered and the services are provided. And so if companies are not on top of this, they are going to fail. And companies do need to be thinking today about how do they transform their organization and their products and their service delivery and how they price and how even what the economic models are because of these technologies.
So as executives think about how they're going to use these technologies like AI and implement intelligent automation, how should they view the implementation of that compared to traditional IT approaches?
Yeah, so I talked about this a little bit before. The traditional IT, has historically been in the business for the last now 40 years, or since I think the first CIO was in the 1980s. Has been in the business of providing the applications, devices, and so the infrastructure networks now to support work being done. And so there's been, and IT organizations have had an uneasy relationship in many cases. I mean, the story of the original personal computers being sort of snuck in the back door because people were unhappy waiting for data analysis to come from the mainframe. So the best IT organizations are certainly very in touch with the business requirements, but there's certainly a whole range there. And I think the interesting challenge with automation, with intelligent automation, is that it's completely embedded in the way that work gets done. So this is what I was talking about before. It's a change in supporting the work that gets done versus who does the work. And because effectively business is hiring a new worker, they need to do the same things that they would do with a human worker, where they need to say, well, how do I define the job? And how do I manage this worker? And what are the skill sets that are required? And how does the job change over time? And so business has to be much more directly involved in the implementation and ongoing use of intelligent automation than they would if they were simply accessing an application. And this is where actually I see most of our clients struggling to scale automation, because it is a cultural change. You actually need not only to change the way IT thinks about this, so that there is this more holistic partnership between business and IT, but you also need to change the way business thinks, and the way that every part of the business, the frontline employee, the manager, people have to start thinking about their work as being a partnership between them and these digital workers. And you have to overcome first people's fear. You have to overcome their resistance to change. You have to educate them about what to do differently in this new environment. The culture change is the hardest part. And I think, we talk a lot about technology, but actually this is part of why, we think this is a C-suite topic, is that actually the culture change and the organizational change and the operating model change are frankly much bigger boulders than the technology.
Right. So speaking of culture change, there's clearly a lot of misperception around automation in the market. I want to ask you to address this. Instead of pigeonholing intelligent automation as just another technology, how should companies think of it instead?
Well, so I use an analogy that I think resonates with people, because we all have experience of going to grocery stores, and we sort of know how things operate. So regardless of our industry, as consumers, we know how grocery stores operate. So you think about a grocery store, and you think about the basic processes in a grocery store. One of them is about restocking the shelves. Hang with me; this is going somewhere. And so the way it's done in a human worker environment is I have a human walking down the shelves and looking at the shelves to see if they're empty, and then running to the stock room and getting the cereal or the coffee or whatever it is and restocking the shelf. Now, in a traditional technology environment, what I could do is I could say, you know what, I want to entirely redesign the way my store works, and I want to take the shelves out. I want to put vending machines in, or I want to I want all the shelves to have weight sensors in them. The opportunity with automation, and the reason that it's so transformational, is because instead of dramatically changing the physical environment, or in the case of digital work, the digital environment, I can introduce a partner to people that helps to do the work in a people-centric way. And so in the store case, I could have a robot that rolls down the aisles, and this is actually something that has technically been proven. It's not cost-effective yet in most cases, but I can have a robot roll down the aisle and use cameras and computer vision to assess the stocking of the shelves and be able to send a signal to the human to be able to say, hey, we need more coffee on row 3. And so I think the really important part of this is that we're taking the human environment and the human work and we're creating this partnership between people and technology to get the same work done that would have been done by people. And so that really is a big transformation in the way we think about organizing and managing work, much more so than, say, an upgrade to the new version of SAP, right? We're
Right.
talking about a very different kind of technology change.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Absolutely. So, Ted, do you think it's reasonable to assume that one day there will be a new metric for evaluating companies? Let's call it degree of automation. The ratio of digital workers to human workers. Is that something that Bain and Company might use, to help a company kind of see where they are and how they compare to their peers?
Well, I do think the notion of benchmarking is important, and I think there are a couple of interesting ways to benchmark degree of automation. The specific example, the ratio of digital worker to human worker, I think is relevant only in the short term, and ultimately isn't relevant. And by comparison, what I'd say is we talk about how many computers are there. What's the ratio of the number of computers to people? And in the early days of computers, that was a really interesting, relevant kind of metric. There was a couple of computers, and one that the government had, and one that academia had, and then we talked about how every company needed a computer, and then we talked about when the personal computer came out, how every home needed a computer. Of course, now today I've got a computer on my wrist, I've got one in my car, I've got 3 in the kitchen, right? And we don't even talk about how many computers there are in the world anymore, because everything has a processor. And I think the same thing will be true for digital workers, right? That we'll see this sort of accelerating application of this concept of automation, where there will be an uncountable number of digital workers, in some cases doing very specialized tasks, and in some cases, being partner or augmenting the people work. So we talk about something called automation quotient, or AQ,
Right.
and it's a concept that's intended to resonate with the concepts that people already understand about IQ and EQ. And one of the things we've learned over the last several decades is these IQ and EQ measurements are not static. That through training, experience, people can increase their IQ, can increase their EQ, but these are useful measures for us to understand people's ability to tackle different kinds of problems. And so is AQ. And so we look at AQ both as a measure for individuals, but also as a measure for organizations, to be able to understand the automation quotient for that individual or organization, and understand what are the things that need to be done to increase AQ. As I said, benchmarking is useful, but make sure you're measuring the right thing.
Yes, exactly. By the way, I'm not sure my IQ is changeable, but that's another topic for another day.
I can point you to the research. It is.
Okay. All right. Thank you. There's hope. So let's talk about let's just pick a business function that you think, is going to dramatically change over the next decade due to technology, innovation, and automation.
Well, I think every business function is going to change, but one of the examples I like to give is contact centers, because I think they're a terrific example of where we've put a lot of human labor to work, doing something which ultimately, most of the time, we want to be very much about following a set of rules. So if I have my credit card stolen or it's lost, and I call up to report it, I don't want there to be 100 different ways that a person might deal with that loss. I want there to be one way, and I want it to be the right way to protect me, protect my financial security, right? And so we do scripts, and we create these protocols, and we have people follow them. And so we've got thousands and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people around the world that answer the phone and follow these scripts. Well, that's already changing. We already see self-service through our mobile devices and through the web shifting some of the activities that we would have traditionally had done. Now I can report my card being missing directly from my iPhone. other thing that's changing, though, is the augmentation of those workers, so that when I do call up, that there is a set of things that an intelligent agent is doing in hand in hand with the contact center agent. And in many cases, we're going to see those calls being handled entirely by an automation. And in some cases, that's already being done. But I think, the example that I gave earlier of Google Duplex sort of points the way to even having a voice conversation. As long as it's following a specific set of rules, which most of these calls do, a machine is going to be able to actually have a conversation with me. And it will be, not only will it be indistinguishable from having a conversation with a person, but it'll actually be better. My call will be answered more quickly. My answer will, my issue will be resolved more rapidly. And so what that means for an organization, though, if you think about it as a functional transformation, if I have 25,000 people in my contact center today, 10 years from now, it's not that I won't have a contact center, but only the exceptions will fall through to people, because everything else will be handled self-service or through automation. And so I won't need 25,000 people in the contact center. I'll need, let's just say 5,000 people. And so the other really interesting thing is the nature of that workforce is going to be different, right? Because I'm going to be asking people to do the really hard exception handling work, right? So it's going to be problem solving and white glove service, and the people that I have in that contact center are going to be have a higher education, have a higher skill set, probably get paid more, certainly be more empowered to make decisions. And so I'm going to need to manage that change over the next decade, where how I recruit, how I train, how I organize, how I reward, and how I oversee that work is going to be different at multiple different points over the 10 years. Now, I also think organizations have a responsibility to think about the displaced workers, right? The 20,000 people that we won't need in that contact center. These are still people who understand our business and understand our customers, and could be making tremendous contributions. And I think one of the big challenges as a functional transformation is for organizations to think through, how do I get the best value out of all that investment I've made over decades in those people, so that they're doing different, more valuable work for me as an organization.
Yeah, clearly there's going to be an impact on numerous jobs, resulting from all the transformation in the call center and in other areas. So how do leadership teams handle this effectively, Ted?
Well, I think the first mistake that I see a lot of organizations making, and so the first thing to address is you have to recognize that there is a real people transformation that is going to happen, and tackle it up front with the right strategy, the right talent strategy to address those issues. Now, every company is going to have a different set of questions, but the worst thing you can do is put your head in the sand and say, I'm not going to think about the people strategy part. And unfortunately, I do see that happen far too frequently. So I would say that the questions that need to be asked are, first of all, what as a culture for our company do we think is our commitment, our responsibility to the people who are going to have their jobs redefined. And I think the most powerful things that I've seen in the marketplace are where companies say to their workforces, this is a partnership to create the jobs of the future. And we have the opportunity to help you reskill, and redefine the work that you do. I think the scary thing about this change for companies is that they're, unfortunately, as a society, we don't have very many safety nets, for that re-education. And so I think there's often a question about what is the economics behind investing in retraining. Companies are happy to give lip service to the idea that they're going to do retraining, but there's real investment that's needed. And so thinking through then what is the work that is going to create value is sort of the second leg to this. So first culture, then secondly saying, okay, we do need to address the economics of this. We're not a social organization. We have a whole set of stakeholders. Employees are one stakeholder. We have to serve all of our stakeholders, so including our shareholders. And so understanding in the way we define our business, where are the opportunities for us to create more value for our customers and for our shareholders, because we're redeploying that human labor in the things that people are good at: curiosity, creativity, relationship development, problem solving. Mm-hmm. And so this is the second really hard part to tackle. And then both of those things need to be then in the context of a transformation program that has a roadmap that aligns with the technology roadmap to be able to make sure that we're investing at the right scale at the right time to move people from the right organizations into these new roles.
Great. So let's draw this conversation to a close. I'm going to ask you here to just maybe summarize. What's the call to action? What are some steps that C-suite execs should be taking right now to ensure that their companies are adequately preparing for the future of work? Could you touch on that?
Absolutely. So I'd say there's a 3-part program that we would encourage and support C-suite executives to undertake. The first is you need to have a top-down leadership focus on the transformation of the business. And what I mean by that is a prioritization of business transformation with the right incentives in place that leadership is encouraging, their managers and their employees to undertake this transformation. And so without that commitment, that resolve, then the rest of the program won't be effective. The second is to put in place an organizational competency around the redesign of the business. And this needs to be a structure that is part technology and part business. Neither one will succeed without the other. And so getting that structure right for what one of our clients calls the Office for Intelligent Automation, where you've got the right business strategists and analysts, but also the right technical strategists and analysts working together to rethink the way that these business processes work. And we really see organizations needing to think through end-to-end business process redesign as a part of what they're doing, because it's not just about technology. It's in many cases processes need to be simplified. In some cases, you need to eliminate things that are being done that don't make sense anymore, and then automate certainly as a component. So it's not just about the technology here. So that competency needs to be there. And then I think the third thing is a commitment to innovation, and there's got to be a recognition that there's no single point in time where you can say, oh, the technology is now done and ready, and we no longer need to think about the next thing being invented. In fact, the pace of technical innovation is only continuing to increase, and those things that we didn't think were possible yesterday will be possible tomorrow. And so you've got to embed in your organization that innovation drive at every level. Employees thinking about it, managers thinking about it, your competency team for business and technology working together needs to be thinking about it, because this is a journey, not a one-time event.
Great. Well, Ted, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and insights today. I really appreciate it. And please stay safe, and we will talk soon.
Thanks, Brad.
You've been listening to Generation Digital Workforce. If you want to hear more about RPA, AI, and other cognitive technologies that are shaping the future of work, join us next time as we continue to go deeper on these topics with industry innovators and experts. To make sure you never miss a future episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. And if you've liked what you heard today, please leave us a review. It's one of the best ways to help more people find valuable content. For show notes and more info, visit us at blueprism.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.